Thank you for tuning in and welcome to SERV's podcast series. The podcasts are brought to you by SERV at UNC Greensboro. We are a university-based center with over 3 decades of experience working with educators and policymakers to improve education. The podcast highlights conversations on various topics ranging from early childhood education to high school reform with a lens on equity. I am Sana Silvera Roy, a communications specialist for the SERV Center, and I will be your host today. All podcasts will be archived and found on SERV's website, www.serv.org. In today's episode, we will discuss science, technology, engineering, and math, also known as STEM, in K through 5 grades. Before discussing our topic, I would like to introduce our featured guest, Steve Johnson. Steve is the STEM specialist for SERV. Steve's extensive experience in education in STEM started with a 9-year career in classrooms as a kindergarten, 2nd grade, and computer lab teacher at Vast Lakeview Elementary in Vast, North Carolina. In the classroom, he discovered the power of allowing students to work together in hands-on, inquiry-based learning. After spending 9 years as a teacher, he transitioned to supporting his colleagues as a digital learning coach and facilitator, which led him to the role of Assistant Director of Technology for Moore County Schools. Steve is passionate about ensuring that all students in North Carolina have accessible, critical skills that STEM experiences can provide. As a STEM specialist for SERV, Steve is proud to work with others across North Carolina to expand STEM skills in K through 5 schools so all students from every background can see themselves in STEM careers that are so greatly needed. Steve, welcome. We're so excited to have you today.
Absolutely. Glad to be here.
Thank you. Before we get started with our discussion, Steve, give us an overview of STEM programs.
Sure. So the program that we have kicked off is an initiative in the state of North Carolina called Building Engineers in K-5 Classrooms. And essentially what we're trying to do is try to get as many kids exposed to high-quality STEM instruction in grades K-5 across the state. And so we're really focusing in on that K-5 classroom to hopefully make sure that kids are aware of the STEM careers and pathways they have available to them and are excited about them and can see themselves choosing that path when they get to grades 6 through 12.
Perfect. And for those of us that don't know what STEM stands for, can you give us the acronym, what it stands for?
Sure, yeah. So science, technology, engineering, and math is basically the base definition of STEM. We've been using that for many, many years. A lot of folks have really expanded it to add other dynamics to it, like you may hear of STEAM, where they've included arts as part of STEM program. You may have heard folks describe it as strategies that engage minds, which is another great way of thinking about it. But essentially what it is, it boils down to the skills we want kids to have to be successful in life. And so a lot of critical thinking, a lot of collaboration, creativity, communication, and really it boils down to the skills that enhance their problem solving as they go out into the world.
How do these skills increase their life skills in life? How does that work?
So one of the great things about it is, when kids are practicing these skills early on, they're learning about the things and experiencing the things that a lot of our employers have been asking us to do with kids for many years. Work in teams, to solve problems. When a problem comes up, that they don't throw up their hands and say, this is it, I'm done with it, but they learn how to persevere through the task. And all at the same time being exposed to all those science and math and technology skills that they need to be successful whenever they graduate.
Perfect. And how does this help with equity in the classroom?
Yeah, so one of the things that's been really cool to watch as we've rolled these programs out is we have really seen a lot of our students and teachers really kind of redefine who can be successful in the classroom. And so what's really cool is whenever you do these skills with kids and you're working through the engineering design process, you've got kids that become new leaders in the classroom. So, kids that have been traditionally marginalized in schools that might not do great on their reading and math EOG tests, when you give them a task that they have to get their hands on and really problem solve as a group, they really show these skills come out that may not have ever been given a chance to come out in the classroom. And so you're seeing all students being able to access these skills and be leaders in the classroom. And what's really been cool about it is, um, I tell the story when we first started rolling these things out in the classrooms. We had a classroom where, uh, you know, if you've been in elementary school classrooms, you know that a lot of times they do reading groups, and so they'll group kids by their reading level to best hit their targets. And so when we started rolling this skills out in the classroom, we had teachers start off with their reading groups and really think about, they had their high reading group, and they would assume that that would be the group that would be the most successful in these tasks. And then they had their lower reading groups, which they thought would have a lot of trouble. And it always turned out to be the opposite. So these kids that are really high functioning or really do well in the reading and math and EOGs, a lot of these hands-on, actively finding problems and solving them, that's really been difficult for them to be a leader in. Whereas these kids that haven't been able to show these skills in the classroom, all of a sudden they're becoming the leaders. And um, it's really cool to watch the teacher's perspective change, and seeing their kids in a new light, because it really shows them really value these skills that they're bringing to the table.
Yeah, so you don't have to be really good at science or math to be into STEM.
Right.
And what's the most exciting part for the teachers and the students?
I would say the most exciting part is just the task itself, and working through the task. And so the way we set up the tasks is we want to make sure that they're very failure driven. And so essentially, whenever we have a task, that I'll just use an example. One of the ones that we rolled out in kindergarten was to build a better house for the three little pigs, right? And so a lot of times we've got kids that are really focused in on that task, and they're so into the work that you could walk in, you could have a band walk through the room, and they would never notice. So just totally engaged in the work and how to get the task solved, and using the materials and get their hands on it. So the most exciting thing I would say would be their engagement with the work. And when teachers see students engaged in groups in the work, and still learning the standards that they need to teach, that's been a really cool game changer for those teachers.
Definitely. And what is the engineering design process?
Yeah, so actually the main vehicle that we use to bring these skills into the classroom. So the engineering design process helps kids to think like an engineer. So essentially, it's like a five-step process. So like if you Google engineering design, you're going to see lots of different things that look a little bit different wording, but it's all basically the same thing. Essentially, what you do is you present students with a challenging task, and the first stage is at the ask stage. So, in that example I was just using, we might say, "How could we build a better house for the three little pigs?" And we stop. We don't say anything else to the students, and it's the students' job to ask the right questions. So they need to ask about what materials can I use. Who am I going to be working with? How much time do I have? Um, and they take that first step, and they all ask questions to clarify the task. And that's when we talk a lot about constraints. And so it's kind of a very real world embedded thing. In the real world, you have constraints of time or materials or resources. We start talking to those kids about those constraints in that ask stage. So that's the first stage, is just asking the questions. What are we doing? And then the second stage is the imagine stage. And so from there, students in their groups, this is all done through groups of 2 to 4, they start imagining what their plan of attack is going to be. And so they're brainstorming ideas. How are we going to get this done? Like I said in the example before, whenever they're asking questions about, what materials do we have, for that one, they're provided like toothpicks and marshmallows, right? And so they need to come up with, how are we going to do this? And the really cool part about that stage is they have to come to consensus. They have to agree on a plan of attack. They can only choose one. And so that forces the kids to really communicate with each other, to meld ideas, to really bargain sometimes with each other. All these things that we do in real life when we have a problem, it forces them into that stage and that imagine stage. From the imagine stage, we make them make a plan. And so before they get their hands on any toothpicks or marshmallows or anything, they have to write out their plan. They have to draw out what it looks like, talk about which materials they're going to use, and gather the materials. Once they have a good plan in place, that's when we actually go to the create stage. So that's the fourth stage. So that's when they actually create their plan. So we have the kids try their plan, the plan of attack, start there. But if it doesn't work, don't stick to it, just like you would anything else. If it's not working, fix it as you go. And so they start with their plan, and the entire purpose of the task is for kids to fail, is to experience failure productively. So when they build that first house or when they build that first catapult and they're trying to do that task the first time, we want them to experience failure. We want it not to work. So, for example, again, going back to that same example with the three little pigs, we usually get a leaf blower out. We like tape a wolf, like a picture of a wolf on top of the leaf blower, and we get it out and we try to knock their house down, right? And so, if it's a good task, then you're going to see a lot of houses fall over. And so, at that point, we move to the final stage of the engineering design process, which is the improvement stage. And so the kids have to observe and figure out, how can I make this better the next time that I make my house. So that's basically the 5 steps of the engineering design process. And the reason it's been really helpful for teachers in the classroom is it aligns to all their content standards. So when we talk about doing this process with students, we're not talking about some extra thing that teachers are doing. We're just talking about, I'm teaching something in a different way to access and activate these skills in the class.
And if you were talking to a teacher or school or district, what resources or what tools are available for them to start these type of programs?
Yeah, so the engineering design process in elementary school really has started essentially in Moore County schools, which is where I was coming from. And so that's where we're trying to spread those best practices. And so the initiative has really taken the lead from there. So there's a ton of resources and availability. And the way that we're doing it, we're structuring it in kind of a broad and a deep way. And so the broad piece of it is the conference, which we'll talk about in a bit, and also trying to just connect folks statewide with the work. And so we're going to be posting a lot of materials up to Go Open NC, which is the place where that's free resources for teachers that can easily access. And so we've got a group created there that we're going to be using that a lot. That's kind of the broad piece. The deeper piece is the cohort work. And so I'm working with 8 districts across the state to do 2-year plans of how they're going to bring these skills into all of their elementary classrooms. And so for them, the big piece of it is making sure that the classroom realities of a teacher are front and center every time we talk. I'm a former teacher. The folks I work with are former teachers. We know the pressures on teaching and the time constraints on teaching. And so the resources are all about bite-sized pieces in the curriculum. So it's aligned to their content standards that they're teaching. And it's not like a 2-week unit. It's more of a 1 or 2 day activity that uses those skills tied to the content. So that's really been the big piece of it, is getting teachers on board requires it to not be an extra thing. Teachers have so much on their plate right now and never won't. And so we want to make sure that it's embedded into their content and that it's easy and accessible for them to use with their kids. And so that's really the main piece of the work, is making sure it's accessible, making sure that teachers can grab onto it. And what we found is when teachers start to use the process with their students, it activates itself. The experience they have with their students and seeing how their students activate and engage with the work and seeing those new leaders come out in their classroom, it's snowball effects. And so they want to do more. And really the main problem we've had is keeping up with demand. And so making sure that we have enough resources and coaching support to get teachers involved.
That's great. And you talked about a conference. I think you had a conference back in April.
Yeah.
Big conference that was very
Yeah.
exciting. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. So this came about a couple years ago. We in Moore County Schools, which is where I taught, and it was the assistant director of technology. We got a grant from the Digital Teaching Learning Department of NCDPI, and so we were able to start hosting this yearly conference, is what we started calling it. It basically took our K-5 robotics competition and turned it into a PD event. And so we started about 5 years ago, where we started inviting folks from across the state just to come and not only see the kids in action, but also learn about how to get started in their own classrooms. And so this past April was the first time we've done it as a 2-day conference. And so we did a 1 day of traditional conference out at Sand Hills Community College, where folks were able to attend sessions with some really excellent presenters from across the state. And then on the second day, they came to Pinecrest High School, where we had at least 350. I didn't get the final count, but we had at least 350 kids from all the elementary schools in Moore County doing the robotics and engineering competition. out at Pinecrest High School. So that was a big success. We had a lot of fun, had a lot of great folks from 40 different counties of North Carolina. And it really felt like laying the foundation for a lot of momentum that's starting to grow across the state.
Definitely. And I was there and it was very exciting. What do you think the most exciting part about the conference was, in your opinion?
Well, I've been to the robotics competition ever since it started, and so I really get excited to see the kids. The part that I loved the most. Oh, there's a couple. That's a hard question. So, I mean, just getting back together and seeing the excitement, enthusiasm for the work. It's been a really tough year for teachers and students and parents, and just being able to see the kids come back together. Have that much interest and excitement back again in that gym. I was worried as we went through the winter, what was it going to look like? But it just came together so nicely. And that was a tribute to the teachers and the diffs in Moore County. So that was the first thing, was just seeing all the kids and getting the energy back in the gym. The second piece that was really exciting for me, and this was kind of hit my sentimental side, is there was a technology award, the Ed Frick Technology Award, that was given to a student, Myra, that has been with us for many years in Moore County. She is graduating from Northmore High School this year, and it was just really special for us to be able to see Myra to receive that award, because we've watched her grow up in robotics and STEM and engineering, and it's really cool to see her go out into the world and put those skills to use.
Do you think STEM awards help with students' confidence and life skills?
Yeah, so the whole reason we wanted to do that award on that day in front of that audience was so those 350 kids could see themselves in Myra. So when Myra's up on the stage getting her award, and she has been sitting in the same exact spot they're sitting in those bleachers, they can really see themselves, that they can be a part of that STEM career and STEM pathway. And to me, that's just really the most rewarding piece, is having our elementary students, because if you don't expose your students early to these skills and make them understand they can do that, they can be an engineer, they can be a programmer, they can be a scientist. If you don't do that early, students start to put labels on themselves and they think they can't. And so it's really cool to have that inspirational moment where a student that looks a lot like them has just graduated and is going to be putting her skills to good use, and will probably be making a lot more money than you or I here in a couple years. But it's really cool to do it as an inspirational moment for them.
Is there anything I left out that you would like to share about the STEM programs?
Well, yeah, they're going really well. The cohorts are getting together and getting their 2-year plans in place, and so I've seen a lot of excitement around that. I'll just also mention that it's all opt-in. It's nothing. We're not requiring anyone to do this. These are all folks that are opting into the program, and so we've got counties from small to huge, and so we've got smaller counties like Ashe County and Edenton-Chowan, all the way up to Guilford and Winston-Salem Forsyth. And so just really helping them to get those K-5 students going and see themselves in these careers that they can then pay off in their classrooms.
Are there any plans for future STEM conferences?
Yeah, definitely. So it's an annual thing, and we're going to do it every spring. And so we've learned a lot from this past conference. It went really well, but as anytime if you're doing the engineering design process and you're not making improvements, then you're pretty much a hypocrite. So we're really looking forward to expanding the conference. I can't really mention yet where it will be, but we're going to have a really good venue for the conference next year. Really expand it out to more folks so they can come and join us. And it'll probably be taking place. It'll be taking place again in the spring next year. And it'll probably be a little bit later in the spring. This year, we kind of ran into people's spring breaks. And so we're excited to get a little bit further out from spring break so more people can attend next year.
It has been a very insightful discussion on K-5 STEM programs with Steve Johnson, the STEM specialist for SERVE. From all of us here at SERVE to all of you, thank you for spending this time with us. Until next time.